Welcome to the Pub Sports Radio Ian Cameron Sports Report for Friday, October 30th. It's Friday. It's the last show of the week, at least the last Ian Cameron Sports Report show for the week here on Pub Sports Radio. But you will see me on the channel this weekend, Saturday college football closing time show at 11 a.m. Eastern with me and Connor Mack, going through the college football card 1 hour prior to kickoff. And then Sunday, make sure you don't forget, set your clocks. Make sure you turn your clock back an hour so you don't miss this show. We're going to be launching a weekly Sunday NFL kickoff show from a betting perspective, noon Eastern, starting this Sunday. It'll be me, Connor Mack, and Ski Profit right here on Pub Sports Radio, breaking down the NFL card leading up to kickoff. So Saturday and Sunday, college football, NFL pregame shows, pre-kickoff shows right here on Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. And I will be part of both of them. So looking forward to that. Before we get into the Friday football six-pack, which is a staple of the Friday edition of the Ian Cameron Sports Report, let's look back on last night. The Atlanta Falcons getting the better of the Carolina Panthers. Bad bet on my part with Carolina. Got a little too greedy because Carolina was my strongest play last week against New Orleans. They cashed. I didn't like them quite as much last night, but I did bet Carolina. Unfortunately, though, a wrong side there as Atlanta got the job done. Give them credit. I mean, multiple fourth down stops, and, first fourth down stop they made, you started to get the sense maybe this is going to be their night. They came up with a couple in the second half to take the ball away from Carolina. And this is now 3 weeks in a row under Raheem Morris. The Atlanta defense, aside from them giving up the game-winning touchdown to Matthew Stafford last week, they've played much better on that side of the ball under Raheem Morris. They're also getting healthier. Grady Jarrett's healthy again. Keanu Neal came back. A.J. Terrell, the cornerback, came back. Ricardo Allen was injured earlier in the year. Tack McKinley is back from a pass rushing standpoint. So they have a lot of their better defensive players back from injury. And that has certainly helped for the Atlanta Falcons. You give them credit, too, offensively. And this is now becoming a problem for Carolina. They didn't have a whole lot of answers for Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons offense last night. Carolina back-to-back games where they've really struggled to get off the field and struggled to get stops on the defensive side of the football. They now lose their third game in a row, and now they fall to 3-5. Atlanta up to 2-6. Long way to go for Atlanta, but you look at all of these heartbreaking losses, the Chicago loss, the Dallas loss, and the Detroit loss last week. This could be a team that's got 5 wins instead of 2 if they're able to find a way to win those close games. But Atlanta gets the money. A tough beat, not a bad beat, but a tough beat if you had the over in the game, because it was sailing over in the first half, but the rain picked up, the wind picked up. Carolina couldn't get things going. Teddy Bridgewater, of course, was out of the game for a period after he took that cheap shot hit. And that was a cheap shot hit too, by the way. That was a very dirty play. He didn't like seeing it, especially for a guy that's had his share of injuries in the past, to have to, suffer through a hit like that. But thankfully, he was able to come back in the game. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough for Carolina to get the win. Atlanta gets the money, and the under also cashes in the Thursday night NFL game last night. The 2 college games, Georgia Southern, I don't know if they were a right side, but they found a way to win and found a way to get the point spread cover. I think a little bit of a unfortunate loss. I don't want to call this a bad beat either, but probably an unfortunate loss if you were on the South Alabama side. They controlled a large part of that game, but unfortunately mistakes, and their defense really wore down in the fourth quarter. Georgia Southern tied it, and then, of course, got the go-ahead game-winning touchdown as well. South Alabama came close to tying the game, but a dropped pass on their final drive inside a minute to go falls incomplete. Georgia Southern takes over, and they are able to hang on for the win. So, a kind of a fortuitous point spread cover if you were on the home favorite in that game, and the game stays under the total. Under was pretty much going to be a good bet wire to wire, and it definitely was last night between Georgia Southern and South Alabama. Colorado State, Fresno State. I had a small bet on Colorado State, very tiny bet, quarter unit, which is pretty much the smallest unit amount I will put on a single bet for the most part. And it was just a dead ticket, from the beginning. What can you say about Colorado State? Inept. I thought actually Steve Adazio was given the keys to a program that, at least toward the end of last season, was playing better football. You're entering this season with a game against a Fresno State team that looks like they're rebuilding. And I still believe that about Fresno State, even though they did look impressive in blowing out Colorado State last night. But I think a lot of that was Colorado State looking pathetic. Steve Addazio, surprise, surprise, not having his team ready for the game, making a bad decision in terms of who to start at quarterback. He went with his heart and his, emotional, personal connections rather than his brain and what was probably right for the offense. He should have probably gone with Patrick O'Brien. He's a guy that's been the quarterback here at Colorado State before. He's got a good arm. He's not the mobile threat that the guy he chose to start, Todd Centeio, who he chose because, he goes back with him. He recruited him at Temple years ago. You got to park that shit aside, man. You got to start thinking about coaching and making decisions that are beneficial for your team and for your program and what's going to help you win. Todd Centeio, if you listen to Addazio last week, he's going to have you believe Centeio completely outplayed Patrick O'Brien in camp leading up, which is why he got the starting job. That's what he said. If you watch Centeio last night, you look at him and say, how the hell did this guy outplay O'Brien in camp? He was awful throwing the football. Like, he missed wide open receivers, just simple throws. He had a wide open receiver in the end zone in a huge, important fourth down play that could have maybe gotten Colorado State back in the game at the time. And he just missed him. He sailed it beyond the out of bounds line at the back of the end zone. It was a horrible throw. And I know he's a better runner than O'Brien, but he was terrible throwing the ball. He couldn't get anything going once Colorado State got behind and had to throw the ball a lot more. Centeio was not going to be the guy capable of doing that. And the defense for Colorado State was just miserable all night long. Rivers, the running back for Fresno, had a field day. And Jake Haener, who looked, I think, horrendous in the game and the season opener for Fresno State against Hawaii. He looked like a different quarterback. I think a product of that, though, was Colorado State's just pitiful defense making them look good. It was a shockingly bad performance from Colorado State. And you don't want to be prisoner of the moment. You don't want to overreact to one game or one performance. But if you're Colorado State and you're getting blasted and obliterated like that by Fresno, okay, a bottom-tier team, in my opinion, in this Mountain West Conference this year that is rebuilding on both sides of the ball, and you get blown out by them, what's that say about the rest of your games upcoming in the Mountain West? So Colorado State, definitely a team I'd be worried about at least a little bit. Now, I know, again, just one game, but that's an alarming opening game to start the season for Colorado State. Fresno State easily getting the money last night in that 38-17 victory, and the game stays under the total as well. All right, that's the Thursday recap. Let's go now to our Friday football six-pack. You know what? One of these Fridays when I do this segment, I got to bring a mug of beer with me. I feel like I should be drinking a beer while I'm doing this. We're talking about six-pack, right? Of course. I should be allowed. You should grant me the ability to drink beer while I do this segment. We are talking about the Friday football six-pack after all. Nevertheless, we'll get to it right now. I've selected 3 marquee college football games from Saturday and 3 marquee NFL games from Sunday that I'll be breaking down. Let's start in the Big 12, a very good one here. Texas, Oklahoma State. We've got the Longhorns and the Cowboys here in this Big 12 game. 2 contenders. Texas is still in the mix, and Oklahoma State right now, they're definitely right in there in this Big 12 conference and a chance to be in the Big 12 championship game. Oklahoma State, 3.5 point favorites here at home in Stillwater, a total 58-59. Texas has been a very uneven team this season. There's no question. They lost a heartbreaker against Oklahoma, didn't play well in that game. They lost to TCU. They didn't play well in that game. They did bounce back. The following week, they beat up on Baylor pretty good, but Baylor's got just a ton of issues on the field. They're struggling off the field. They've got some issues as well, particularly in terms of the coronavirus as well. So, there's issues right now with Texas in terms of being able to string consistency together. And now you look at their schedule and the way they've played so far, the Longhorns, are they ready to go on the road against an Oklahoma State team that defensively I've been impressed? The Oklahoma State's defense, Mike Gundy and the Cowboys have not been known for putting a really, really strong defensive football team on the field. in years past. They might have one this year. I'm impressed with a lot that I'm seeing from this team on the defensive side of the football. They've gotten a pass rush. They've done a pretty good job against the run as well. This Oklahoma State defense, it'll be interesting to see if they're able to keep that going here into this game against the Longhorns. But, you got to be impressed with what you're seeing from Oklahoma State on the defensive side of the football this season, giving up just 3.5 yards per carry, 127 yards per game, only 176 passing yards per game. Now you could, they're actually, their schedule hasn't been that poor. They played a pretty good AAC team, Tulsa, played West Virginia. Okay, Kansas is a bottom feeder, but they also beat Iowa State 24-21. That's a pretty good win. I like that Cyclones team quite a bit, Brock Purdy, and the defense did a good job neutralizing him and neutralizing that Iowa State offense for the most part. So there's a lot to like about Oklahoma State on defense. You look at Texas, they barely escaped Texas Tech and didn't cover. They beat up on a horrible UTEP team, and they beat Baylor, who've got a ton of issues right now. The games against the best teams on their schedule, TCU and Oklahoma, they fell short and lost both of those games, Texas here. So, yeah, and Oklahoma State now with, of course, Spencer Sanders back in the fold, healthy again, and probably, it gives them the best chance offensively. It hasn't been quite that same explosive, potent, light up the scoreboard Oklahoma State offense this year. But I think they're going to get better as time goes on. The Texas defense has been a bit of a disappointment so far this season. Oklahoma State has also done very, very well head-to-head against Texas. 7-3 straight up, 6-4 against the spread the last 10 head-to-head meetings. Sam Ehlinger and Texas, I think to be effective, they'd like to have that balance. I still don't think of Sam Ehlinger as a quarterback that can do it all exclusively in the passing game. And with Oklahoma State's run defense really showing up so far, it may be a little bit of a chore here for Texas to move the football here. Look, normally, if anyone's followed me for years, talking about Tom Herman in Texas, especially the Tom Herman as an underdog trend, you know that I've almost always bet on Texas when they've been an underdog. And I did so as well when they played Oklahoma on a few weeks ago in the Red River rivalry. But you've got to be careful with this Tom Herman underdog trend. It's petering out. It's running out of gas. It's running out of steam. This trend is not holding up lately the way it had previous to that. In fact, the last 9 times Tom Herman's been an underdog here with Texas, they're just 4-5 against the spread. So that seemingly unbeatable, unstoppable betting angle, Tom Herman as an underdog, well, it hasn't been cashing lately. Not as much, not even close. And I think Oklahoma State's still the better team here. So it's not a game I bet, but I do have a lean to Oklahoma State here at -3, -3.5. I'm going to dare the Texas Longhorns to beat a pretty good team, something they haven't been able to do yet so far this season. Moving on now to the SEC, and it's not the Alabama game. We're going to talk Arkansas, Texas A&M, Saturday night SEC West matchup. Texas A&M 13.5-point favorites at home in College Station. The total 54 in this game. The total has seen some serious under money. It's dropped a couple of points. I agree. This game probably does stay under the total. A&M is going to be one of those teams that's just methodical on offense. Don't be fooled by the Florida game. And I cashed an over with A&M in the Florida game. And the other game that went over the total for them was against Alabama. But you're talking about Alabama's offense and Florida's offense, which are explosive, quick strike offenses. And that's a big reason why those two games went over the total. Against Mississippi State, a plodding offense, a struggling offense. The game stayed under. Against Vanderbilt, who have no offense whatsoever to speak of. That game also easily stayed under the total. I don't think Arkansas's offense is as bad as Vanderbilt's. In fact, I know it's not as bad as Vanderbilt's, but it's not that explosive offense either. This is still a work in progress for Arkansas on the offensive side of the football. I do think Felipe Franks, the quarterback for Arkansas, Florida transfer, he has played better in the last couple of games. I've seen progression from him in the passing game. He kind of struggled the first few games, but maybe a product of that was schedule related. You played a very good Georgia defense. You played Mississippi State. You played Auburn early on, struggled a little bit. but they finally got the offense going pretty good against Ole Miss in their game before their bye. Both of these teams, by the way, I should note, on a bye week prior to this game. So no advantage either way for these teams in terms of scheduling. But Arkansas has started to get their offense going. You look at 28 and 33 points in their last two games against Auburn and Ole Miss. It's not going to be as easy here. A&M's strength is probably their defense. Although Kellen Mond, the last couple of games in particular, he's played pretty well at quarterback for A&M. But it's not going to be easy for him because, Arkansas, I think one thing that people have kind of been surprised about with Arkansas is how good they've played defensively this season. They have played better. I know the Georgia game kind of got away from them in the second half, but for well over a half of that game, they were bottling up Georgia. They shut down Mississippi State. Don't be fooled by the Auburn score. Auburn got some breaks to go their way, a horrible call late in the game, but for the most part, Arkansas kept that Auburn offense in check. And then against a very good Ole Miss offense, which has been very explosive all season under Lane Kiffin and a really good quarterback in Matt Corral. You could say Arkansas defense, they corralled him and that Ole Miss offense prior to their bye week. 21 points, holding Ole Miss to that number is pretty impressive. And Arkansas has been an undervalued team from the beginning of the season. They're 2-2 straight up, but more importantly, 4-0 against the spread. One of the few teams remaining in college football, at least of the teams that started their season in September. One of the few teams remaining that still has an unblemished and undefeated ATS record. I think this could be a few too many points to be laying with A&M. And Arkansas has clearly, the betting markets have been wrong, have been incorrect, have been lagging behind on this Razorbacks team in Sam Pittman's first year as the head coach. You got to admit, he's done a really good job. They've been competitive in the majority of their games. Look at Arkansas' schedule. They lost only by 2 against Auburn, and they should have won that. And they were neck and neck with Georgia for well over a half. In fact, they had a halftime lead in that game, and Georgia ran away with it in the second half. But there's a lot to like with Arkansas. There's finally a little light at the end of the tunnel. And in terms of in this price range with A&M laying close to 2 touchdowns, I don't necessarily trust them laying these kind of points. I like Arkansas here. I think it's a bettable game. I think it's a game worth betting toward the Arkansas side. You can now get 13.5 with them. Maybe even not even a rush to bet it because we've seen some A&M money trickle in. Definitely at 14. I might even put a little bit more on Arkansas here. I have trouble believing in A&M as a blowout team, in terms of being able to put the hammer down and absolutely annihilate a football team. They only beat Mississippi State by 14. They only beat Florida by 3. And they only beat lowly Vanderbilt in their season opener by 5. It's not the team I trust to win by margin. I like the Razorbacks here, plus the double digits as underdogs in this SEC matchup. And we wrap up the college football portion of the 6-pack with the Big Ten matchup, national TV at night on ABC, Ohio State, Penn State. Ohio State 11-point favorite, 64.5 the total. Yeah, you can try to bet against Ohio State at your own peril. I'm not doing it. I can tell you right now from a side perspective, I would lay the points or nothing at all in this game. I might have a tiny little play on the Buckeyes here. The one thing that worries me, though, is Penn State statistically played very well against Indiana. Obviously, they don't have the win to show for it. We know what happened at the end of that game. They didn't take the knee, scored the touchdown. Indiana came back, forced overtime, and then the Hoosiers won it in OT against Penn State. But Penn State dominated that game from a yardage perspective. They outgained Indiana by well over 200 yards. So what was the problem? The problem was Penn State shot themselves in the foot, missed opportunities to put points on the board. Turnovers were an issue. Problem finishing drives as well. All of it were a problem for the Penn State Nittany Lions. They're also shorthanded at running back going into this game. Journey Brown, of course, not playing, not available. And now the guy that took his place is also out for this game for Penn State. So they're going to have to rely a lot more on the passing attack of Sean Clifford at quarterback if they're going to move the ball here against Ohio State. And I actually think they could do some damage against that Ohio State secondary. Other than Sean Wade, the All-American cornerback, who decided to come back after initially deciding to opt out, that's a very inexperienced young secondary. Taylor Martinez in Nebraska didn't necessarily pick on that secondary because, again, Taylor Martinez is not a great passing quarterback. He never has been. They've really relied more on running the football. Penn State's going to pick on that secondary a little bit more, and I think they'll have success doing it. However, is Penn State's defense going to slow down and stop Justin Fields and this outstanding Ohio State skill position group? I know they lost J.K. Dobbins, and they didn't run the football quite as successfully as they wanted, but they've still got a pretty solid duo at running back. The biggest concern is Chris Olave's status at wide receiver. He's probably their best big play threat at receiver, but it looks like he's been upgraded to probable and expected to suit up here for the Buckeyes. But even if he doesn't go, they've got a lot of depth at wide receiver this season, Ohio State. I do expect Olave to play here in this game. And for Justin Fields, I thought he played great last week against Nebraska. I think Ohio State, there were some fans critical of the win somehow. I mean, you won 52-17 last week against Nebraska. What more do you want, people? I mean, my goodness. If you're going to quibble about a 52-17 win, what more do you want? But I thought they played good in that game, especially on offense. Defense, yeah, they gave up some plays, and that's why I think Penn State's going to be able to move the ball here, but I don't think Penn State's defense is going to have a whole lot of success stopping and slowing down this very good and potent Ohio State offense. Penn State runs not a fast tempo, but slightly above average tempo. You could say the same about Ohio State as well, and I think Penn State's going to have to put the ball in the air a lot more because of the injury, the cluster injury situation they have at running back. So we saw this total open 61.5. It's now 64 at the current number. And I agree with the upward move. I cashed a ticket with Ohio State over the total last week. In fact, I also cashed a ticket with Penn State over the total, although the Penn State Indiana over last week, let's be honest, I had no business winning it. It should have stayed under. We needed the overtime to get there. But nevertheless, I'm not necessarily ready to change my opinion just because that game should have stayed under with Penn State last week, that they're maybe not going to be an over team this year. I think they will be. I think this will be a higher scoring game. It doesn't look like in a weekend full of venues and games that could be impacted by rain, snow, and specifically wind. Make sure you're keeping an eye on the weather across NFL and college football this weekend. There are a lot of games that could be impacted by wind. It doesn't look like this game is going to be one of them. I lean Ohio State. I think my stronger opinion, though, is the over here, over 64 in this one. But from a side perspective, it's either lay the 11 for me with Ohio State or pass. Let's not forget, this isn't your same old Penn State Saturday night home game on national TV. There's no whiteout. There's no loud crowd support. It's going to be a very quiet environment. Ohio State's not going to be quaking in their boots, playing in Happy Valley here. This is a significantly diminished home field advantage for Penn State Saturday night when they take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. All right, let's go to NFL and that portion of the Friday Football Six-Pack. Let's start with I got three good divisional matchups that we're going to be breaking down here with the NFL portion of the Six-Pack, starting in Orchard Park, New York. AFC East battle, New England Patriots, Buffalo Bills. Buffalo 4-point favorites, 41 the total. I mentioned on the Football Frenzy show on Thursday here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel, Buffalo is the only side I can bet here. Buffalo is probably not the side I'm going to end up betting in this game. It's the only side. I am not betting New England. I don't want New England in this game. But there are reservations with Buffalo, especially with them laying more than a field goal. They do have the better offense with Josh Allen, and it looks like John Brown is coming back from injury. Cole Beasley and Steph Diggs and Gabriel Davis, the rookie, has shown flashes of being a big-time impact receiver. The running game with Singletary and company. This is a better offense than New England. New England's offense is in complete and utter shambles. We saw it last week against San Francisco and the week before against Denver. And like I said on the football show, it's not just Cam Newton. Cam Newton's a big part of the problem. He hasn't played well. He's been taking too many sacks. He's been holding onto the ball too long. He's been inaccurate with the ball. But the offensive line's been an injury-riddled mess all year. They got healthier last week, and they were better, but they still weren't great. And more importantly than anything, this is as weak a receiving core as there is in the NFL right now. I don't think there's any argument. Nobody can break away from an opposing cornerback one-on-one down the field. There's no speed on this receiving core. There's no ability to separate from coverage. Now Julian Edelman's out. due to injury, and he wasn't even having that great of a season. So I don't know how big of an impact this injury might end up being. Past years, they would be really, really in trouble without Edelman. This year, he's not having a great year, but still, even without him now, who do you turn to at receiver? And N'Keal Harry's been injured this week and may or may not play. Who do you turn to? Demir Bird, Jacoby Myers? Like, that's what you're looking at now in terms of your next top receivers for this New England team. There's not a lot of talent around Newton to work with here. Now, the flip side argument to that is Buffalo's defense has taken a turn for the worse this season, and I can't explain it. I mean, it's largely the same personnel that they had the last 2 seasons where they've been one of the better defenses in the NFL. They haven't played that same way this year. They're not getting the pass rush they wanted. They're not getting they're not stopping the run at all. In fact, they've been absolutely crushed, in terms of running the football. And if you're New England, you got to commit to running the football because Buffalo struggled to stop it in recent weeks. But the Bills defense, maybe there was a buy sign on them. I know it was the Jets last week, but they shut down the Jets. They held them to 4 yards of offense in that second half, allowing them to get the win. That was as good a half of football as I've seen from the Bills defense all season. Now, can they carry it on? And I know you think, but that was the Jets. Is the New England offense really humming all that much better than the Jets offense right now, at least the last 2 weeks? Not really. So I think this is a matchup where the Bills defense against a struggling offense, they can use the confidence they got from last week and carry it over here. And another thing to keep in mind with Buffalo, look, they haven't been the same since their schedule got screwed up and completely thrown out of whack weeks ago when their game against Tennessee got moved to Tuesday. And then the Thursday game against Kansas City that week got shifted to Monday the following week. So they had played a Tuesday game. They had to prepare for the Chiefs and the Titans at the same time. They didn't play well. Then they had to play Monday at home to Kansas City on a short week. They didn't play well. And then they had another short week going to the Jets last Sunday. Finally, for the first time in weeks, the Bills have a regular work week in their favor, a regular routine. Sunday game, and then your next game is Sunday, a full work week in between games. That can't be anything but a positive for the Buffalo Bills going into this game against New England. So to me, it's Buffalo -4. It's a lean. It's not going to be a bet unless this gets down to 3, which is my buy sign for Buffalo. At 4, I'm not touching it, but it's a lean to the Bills. Here's another thing why I'm hesitant, though, on Buffalo. All the talk this week in the Western New York media, people covering the Bills players themselves, it's a big game for us. They know the New England Patriots have owned them, but they're not supposed to own the Bills this Sunday. This is supposed to be the Bills game. This is the Bills spot. This is the Bills game. They're better than New England finally this year. But when a team has just dominated you, it sometimes gets in your psyche, and there is pressure. You better believe there's a lot of pressure on Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, the head coach, and this entire Bills team to win this game. And because if they do, they're 6-2. They're now, 4 games clear of the Patriots. They might go up another game on Miami in the division, assuming the Dolphins lose to the Rams, which is at least a possibility. And they would just take a stranglehold on the AFC East if they win this game, Buffalo. However, the pressure gets to you and you lose this game, you're 5-3. The Patriots are right back in it, right behind you. And they go to 3-4. They're right back in the division race again. Miami is clawing at your nipping at your heels as well if you lose on Sunday to New England. So this is a huge game for the Bills team, a huge game for the Bills franchise. And in case you haven't been watching the Buffalo Bills for the last 20 to 25 years, pressure games hasn't been their thing. They have not played well in these kind of spots. So it's a big-time game that we'll see if they're ready to handle it. On paper, it lines up that they should match up well. They should win. They should cover. It's the only way I'm betting it would be a lean toward the Bills here. But I don't know. It's something's gnawing in the pit of my stomach here. And for all the people saying, New England's going to show up. New England's going to show up here after getting embarrassed against San Francisco. They were supposed to show up last week against San Francisco after losing to Denver, and they didn't. Be careful going to that well one too many times. Next game, we've got Seattle, San Francisco. Seattle 3-point favorites, 53 the total in this one. Who's going to play exactly in this football game, I think, is the biggest question we've all got to ask ourselves. I mean, there's just incredible amount of injuries on both sides right now. going into this game on Sunday, the Seahawks and the 49ers. For Seattle, it's in Jamal Adams again has been a major concern, not having him on that defense, a defense that's been terrible in terms of getting a pass rush. And that hasn't really gotten any better. San Francisco, of course, has been dealing with San Francisco cornerbacks, wide receivers, offensive line, the defensive line, of course, with Bosa and Ford, sidelined indefinitely. It's been injuries everywhere. But the good news for San Francisco is they found a way to persevere it and be able to find ways to win back-to-back really good wins against the Rams and the Patriots. However, it's going to be a challenge year now. You went in New England last week, back to the West Coast, playing a Seattle team that's probably going to be chomping at the bit following their first loss of the season against the Arizona Cardinals in that thrilling Sunday night football game that went to overtime last week. It's definitely a good spot for Seattle. It's not the greatest spot for San Francisco. I think if you're a spot bettor, a scheduling spot handicapper, you're attracted a little bit to Seattle. But I'm in that camp of I'm leery of laying points of any kind with a bad defense, and a defense that can't get stops, and a defense that's missing key personnel, which the Seahawks are. And a Seahawks defense that was out on the field a ton last week because of that overtime game against Arizona. That's troubling against San Francisco's offense. Jimmy Garoppolo has gotten it going the last couple of weeks. He's played better. The run game's been there. George Kittle's being back the last few weeks has been a difference maker for the 49ers offense. And Kyle Shanahan can flat out scheme and get an offense properly ready, and devise a good offensive game plan against a defense that's not getting a pass rush, that's not stopping the run, that's been tough, that's been beaten up in the secondary with big plays in the passing game, and is also without Jamal Adams potentially again, which is a guy they made sure they went out and got because he'd fix their defense. Well, he can't fix their defense if he's not healthy and he's not playing. And that's the issue here for the Seattle team right now. So to me, the over makes the most sense to me in this game at 53-54. I'm going to wait to see how it goes. The spot is strong enough on Seattle, especially when Seattle opened a 6-point favorite and now is all the way down to 3. If you like San Francisco, you missed the best number already. At the current -3 price with Seattle here at home off the loss, I could only bet the Seahawks in this game and in this spot, but I think the stronger bet for me is going to be the over. I haven't really bet much of anything except for one game, and we'll get to that in a second here for Sunday yet, because there's so many games that could be impacted by weather and wind in particular. But definitely I am eyeing a bet on the over here in this game, which is currently anywhere from 53 to 54. But should be a really good game, a fun one to watch. The 49ers and Seahawks in the best division in the NFL this season, bar none, the NFC West. All right, third and final game on the NFL portion of the six-pack. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, one of the best rivalries in all of sports, and it's certainly among the best rivalries in the NFL. Baltimore back up to 4.5-point favorites now in a lot of spots, 46 the total. Baltimore opened a 6-point favorite, went all the way down to 3.5 at one point on Baltimore, and now I've seen some Ravens buyback up to 4.5. Look, I get it's Baltimore off a bye. It's John Harbaugh, who's been outstanding off a bye in his career, straight up NATS. But I look at this Baltimore team as a team that I don't know if they've put it all together yet. I have not seen this team play a truly amazing football game, especially against a good team. They're one time to really show out. I guess you could say the Cleveland game was against a pretty good team, but I'm talking about a really good team, an elite team, and I don't think Cleveland's quite elite just yet. The one elite team they've played was Kansas City, and they got schooled in that game, Baltimore. Their defense couldn't stop Mahomes, and the Chiefs shut down Baltimore's ground attack and forced Lamar Jackson to beat them in the passing game, and he wasn't capable of doing that. That was Kansas City that did that. Pittsburgh has that exact same profile of a defense that can take away Baltimore's strength, and that's running the football. And Mark Ingram's not going to play, so they're going to rely on Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins now at the running back spot in this game for Baltimore. Pittsburgh's been amazing against the run. Derrick Henry didn't get anything going until very late in the fourth quarter, maybe because finally Pittsburgh's defense was getting a little bit tired. But the way they bottled up Derrick Henry in the victory against Tennessee last week to stay undefeated. That was impressive by the Steelers defense. And if they take away the ground game and they make Lamar Jackson a pocket passer and a throwing quarterback, that's not the methodology for Baltimore to have success and win games. And that's the big issue I have for them. I thought when this line first opened at Baltimore -6, I thought it was a slap in the face to Pittsburgh. I couldn't believe it opened that high. It got bet down to 3.5, which I think is probably where this number should be. This Baltimore-Pittsburgh game should never, regardless of who the favorite is, they should never be more than 3.5. All these teams do is play close games down to the wire, usually decided by a field goal against one another. And now we're starting to see Baltimore get some money here again, up to 4.5. Give me Pittsburgh here, plus the points. I think at the very worst case scenario, the Steelers lose by a field goal. I think it's one of those tight, down to the wire, physical Baltimore-Pittsburgh games that we've become accustomed to seeing over the years. And I really like what I'm seeing out of the Steelers offense. And the Baltimore defense, to me, has still got to show against a pretty good offense. What can they do? They face Washington. They faced Philadelphia. They faced Cincinnati with a banged-up offensive line. That's been the offenses that Baltimore has faced in recent games. They're facing now Ben Roethlisberger, who's playing better and better each week. Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, and Chase Claypool are becoming a triple threat at wide receiver for the Steelers in recent games. This is going to test that Baltimore defense, and I'm not sure they're ready to pass the test here. I think above a field goal, it's got to be the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers for me, plus the points. Should be a great game. I'm looking forward to it. Steelers and Ravens, a big one on Sunday afternoon. All right, that is your Friday football six-pack, and that is the end of the show, and that is the end of the week of shows here on the Ian Cameron Sports Report here at Pub Sports Radio. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and I appreciate all the kind words and comments. I'm glad we're getting a lot of people tuning in, enjoying this show. I enjoy recording them on a daily basis. Reminder, I'm back on Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern with Connor Mack for the College Football Closing Time show here at Pub Sports Radio, and then Sunday at noon, we premiere our new weekly Sunday pre-kickoff NFL show. Sunday at noon, me, Connor Mack, and Ski Profit right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. Make sure you tune in for that. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the football weekend, NFL and college football. Good luck with all of your wagers. Remember to keep tuned in to pubsportsradio.com and the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel for tons of great daily content every day. Enjoy the games and good luck. Have a phenomenal Halloween weekend. Don't overload on too much Halloween candy this weekend, but have fun, enjoy it, have a great weekend, and I'll be back with you on Monday for another edition of the Pub Sports Radio Ian Cameron Sports Report.